Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, this is At Lunacy. It's a podcast where I mainly talk about African movies and TV shows, but I'm taking a bit of a pivot, tiny pivot, just for now, for the times. So today I want to talk about John Allen Namu. I almost called him John Taylor Namu. I don't understand what's happening. Anyway, so I want to talk about John-Allan Namu's mini documentary about the Mungiki. We're living in what can best be described as interesting times. Very, very terrifying times that will require a lot from us. To push back on the evil that is threatening to engulf us. So it feels like we're back 30, maybe 40 years. It's crazy. It's crazy. I never imagined I would feel like this about this country. After 2002, it was so hopeful. Anyway, so let's dive in. Maina Njenga is back to government somehow, and he's in bed with some of the most powerful people in this nation. We are back to abductions. We are back to killings. We are back to people being afraid to just be on the streets to protest. We are back to people just being afraid to even say things now, right? And there's all these TikTok videos, jokes about people being abducted in the middle of criticizing the government, and it's funny, but it's also chilling. Anyway, so let's look at what John-Allan Namu found on the Mungiki. I want to talk about it. I want to watch it. I watched it one time, and I want to watch it again, and this time sort of just talk about the things that are popping up for me, the few things that are popping up for me, the things that are chilling me, because it was very chilling for me the first time. I hope that with the benefit of time that it won't be as scary, but anyway, let's see. It's a little 3-part series, must be about 20 minutes long. Let me just confirm. Can't be longer than that. It's each is about 7 minutes long, 23 minutes, so that's not too long. But I'm a yappa. Who knows? Who knows where we end up? All right, let's talk about it.
The nation stands on the edge of a deep, dark precipice. Even though Kenya was able to avert a national meltdown after the controversial general election, the issues that were the baseline for the transformation of the post-election conflict still remain unattended to. Marauding gangs of youth roam the countryside and towns at this time. And after the political crisis was solved, they still remain, still angered, and still casting a long shadow on the peace and security of this country. Few of these groups have such a wide recognition as the cause and, to an extent, the cure to Kenya's unresolved problems as the Mungiki. But where does the Mungiki draw its history from? Little known Olngarua in Laikipia West District, the place where the Rift Valley and Central Province meet, forms the setting upon which the conflict begins. It being the town in which one of Kenya's more controversial personalities, John Maina Kamunya, alias Maina Njenga, was born. The history of the Mungiki is inextricably tied to this one man's story. Born in the settlement schemes of Laikipia West, Maina Njenga spent his formative years learning and playing like any child born in the countryside. We visited a homestead that Maina Njenga used to frequent when he was young. A friend to many, people here including John Kipngeno Kiptanui remember him fondly, especially his kindness.
Kulikuwa na viatu amenunuliwa inaitwa Manila. Viatu. Hii Sadak. By then, ilikuwa open shoes. Silikuwa open shoes. Silikuwa somehow ule kama ya kawaida tu, lakini ni zile za zamani. Na alipea kijana ya rafiki yangu mwingine hapa, jirani tu mwingine hapa anaitwa Beuri. Yeye akanyanya. Akapea hiyo pia.
At school, Maina often found himself in the role of an organizer, keen to get all his classmates involved in any school-oriented activity. He was also a keen student, hardly ever slipping below the top 10 students in his year. A child's formative years may at times reveal what he is to become. Maina's case was no different.
He was a bit sharp from the others, the other 12. You see, this leadership, you know, it comes up slowly by slowly. It started from very far.
Unaona hii mawe hii, tulitafuta jiwe kama hii. Tulikuwa natafuta jiwe kama hii. Kama hii tulikuwa naitaka Volkswagen. Hii jiwe vile inakaa shape ya tortoise. Tulikuwa naitaka Volkswagen. Sasa tsaile tulikuwa naendeshaka hivi, ananiambia tusome, tutakuja kununua nini? Magari.
Maina's high premium on education, friends and relatives tell us would later see him invest heavily in his primary school, a giving trait that many cannot reconcile with the tag of criminal organizer that he bears now.
Hiyo si nasikiaga, sisi tunasikia mbaya. Kwa maana sisi najua mtu yetu hakuna pitina kama hiyo. Hiyo ni watu nawekelea nini? Kuharibu jina ya mtu.
On the whole, however, nothing in Maina's past until that point could have informed his future. His was the story of millions of others.
You know what's interesting to me? The way that old man says, people are lying about Maina Njenga, right? Like, it's not true that he is what people in Nairobi are saying, like a criminal gangster, like the head of a criminal organization, that kind of thing. And it reminds me about how when women come out with stories about men, there's no shortage of people. There's no shortage of people who will come through and say, oh, you know, I used to know him when I was a kid, like he won like that. I used to know him when he was like this, he won like that. The most recent place I saw that was in Know My Name, the book by, what's her name? It was a really fantastic book. I need to find the name because like I can't move on without that. It's gonna nag me. It's gonna be somewhere in my head, just making me feel like find it. So I'm gonna find it shortly. So anyway, in Know My Name, when the girl, I actually feel really weird calling her by Chanel Miller. Her name is Chanel Miller. This book is fantastic. Like, listen, if you've never read a book by somebody who has been abused, and here we're talking about, in this particular instance, it's sexual violence. If you've never read something like that, read this. Like, this will really help you understand what happens to the victims afterwards. Anyway, that's not the point. Anyway, why do I keep saying anyway? So, in the book, when Brockton is being sentenced, people who know him sort of write in. And the people who write in, at this point, he's in university, right? And the people who write in are people who knew him when he was 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. And they're like, no, you know, I know him, he went like that. And, you know, when you read it, you're like, what is your middle school teacher doing writing about this? What is your French teacher when you're 15 doing writing a character statement about you? They don't know you. This is like what? Almost 10 years later. It's like 10 years later. What do they know? What do they know about the person you are now? Nobody is the same person at 25 that they were at 10. Why is the person who knew you at 10 writing about the kind of person you are at 22? Why? How? Which? And so that's what's happened. That's the same thing that happens here. Men are always like in a rush. We're always in a rush to just like sanitize people. It's like, no. I know that nigga. I know that nigga. Like he won like that. You know him 10 years ago. You don't know him. Right? Even if you knew him 5 years ago, you don't know him now. And even if you know him now, there's elements about him that you don't know that other people know. Right? For example, the way a man is with his friends is not the way he is with his woman. It just isn't. She knows a very different person. The way somebody is with their parents is not the way they are with like their friends. A good number of people really pretend with their parents. So, like, I get really surprised about the speed with which men rush to defend other men. It's like, no, 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 I know that nigga, that he ain't like that. Fuck you. You don't know him. You know him when he was 10. You don't know him now. Nigga is in his 50s, 60s. You don't know him now.
Hiyo si nasikiaga, sisi tunasikia mbaya. Kwa maana sisi najua mtu yetu hakuna pitina kama hiyo. Hiyo ni watu nawekelea nini? Kuharibu jina ya mtu.
Like, I swear to God, I mean, I cannot get over how ready people usually are to rush in and defend men. Like, I don't know why I'm still shocked, but like, I'm just like, what? What is with this old man? Oh my God. Like, why don't we just believe? At the very least, all you could do is just be like, ooh, wee. Like, it was really shocking to us. Like, I don't want to believe that child that I knew is doing that. And so, you know, I'm just going to wait it out until, like, a court determines or something. Like, you could say that. You cannot decide that people are lying about your... Come on.
Maina moved away from home to begin his secondary school education. It was while that he was a Form 3 student that his life and the effect that it would have on the country would change forever. It was in 1986 that a young, otherwise unremarkable young man called John Maina Kamunya passed through these gates to begin his education at the Jomo Kenyatta High School. And it is within this year that, according to friends and relatives, he died and resurrected, emerging from these gates a year later as Maina Njenga, the man that we've come to know as a leader of the proscribed Mungiki sect. Maina's alleged transformation led him to form the Mungiki sect, where he began his largely spiritual ministry.
Maina Njenga was called to teach people how to stay with God and how to walk with God and how to know God.
Indeed, it was this tenet of the Mungiki that attracted many of his fellow Kikuyu. Men like Kiama Waroe, a friend and neighbor and Mungiki adherent, and years later in 1996, it became the answer that John Jogona, a factory worker in Nakuru, would believe.
The existing churches at that time had no answers to my spiritual questions at that time. And the Mungiki movement came to fill in that gap. And I found so many answers within the teachings of the sect.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, because of economic hardships that the country was witnessing, many youth turned into religion. But those who did not go to the Christian Protestant movement, evangelical churches, found their solace in traditional churches and traditional African churches.
Maina Njenga's Mungiki began to gain popularity through its religious teachings first, spreading even beyond the borders of ethnicity. This Mungiki baptism was, for instance, carried out in Baringo, home to the Tugen community and the Pokot.
So obviously it's not surprising that during harsh economic times people find God again. There's nothing like difficulties in life to draw you back to God, to make you find him again. A lot of people even believe, we most recently heard it with, what's his name, Jamie Foxx, talking about how God used a stroke to stroke him and bring him back to him. So yeah, that's expected. What's interesting to me and very concerning, truly, this is just about where I started getting really scared. He was answering this spiritual need that people have, right? So one of the man interviewed says he had questions that the church didn't answer, and that the teachings of the sect answered. People were coming to him to be taught more about God, how to walk with God, how to know God. Like, I feel like churches and other religious groupings are like the most powerful, are basically like the most powerful institutions that we have. Because whereas other people, even politicians, have to sort of get crowds to come to them, have to make efforts to get crowds to come to them, people go to churches, they take themselves to churches. And so this is almost an organic group. And it's really scary because for the people who have this need, it's so easily exploited. And we have seen it. We've seen it with Shakahola. We've seen it in all sorts of places. We saw it with Bishop Dare. We see it everywhere. We see it even in these churches where people buy the pastor a car and they contribute towards his jet and just all sorts of things. And this is why I feel like, especially when it comes to leftist spaces that are critical of religion, there's so much work to do in terms of understanding the spiritual need that people have, because if we don't create space for it, which is, really, not dismiss it as completely stupid, right? If we don't allow people to value it, if we don't allow that diversity when it comes to spiritual matters, people will go here. Will go to this conservative type traditionalists. They'll go to them. And here, I don't want to make it sound like, I don't want to come off like I'm saying there's something wrong with traditional views. It's just authoritarians, fascists, they really like going back to the traditional things because they had such clear-cut traditional power was so clear. And you see it even here. The people who were coming to this sect are men. That's who's coming. Because religion, almost all patriarchal religions, actually, it's not almost all patriarchal religions favor men, they value men, they privilege men, they elevate men to a higher status. All of them, everyone who sort of has Abraham in their Bible. And even those who don't, a good number of those who don't, they elevate men. And so, of course, men are going to come to this. And that is scary because what are you supposed to do with that? What can we do? Because what these people are being offered, we can't offer them, right? They're being offered a return to sort of the traditional way of being, way of life, traditional order, the way, this is how God intended for things to be. All of these people are men, being baptized by men. Obviously, it's very patriarchal. So like this is the way God wants it to be. This is the order God wants things to be, and this is the hierarchy and the ranking of things. What are we supposed to do with that? Because we can't offer them that. On this other side, we're saying you're going to have to give up all of that privilege because it's made up privilege, and all it does is it harms women. It harms you too, but it harms women more. And what we want is an egalitarian society where there's no hierarchies and rankings and everyone is valued equally. And there's nothing special about being a penis person. Like, who would take that deal? Why would they give that up? That's what really chills me. Why would you give this up? You have gone back to this old traditional way of being. Yeah, somebody's teaching you about God. And patriarchal traditional God. And this is, it's desirable to young men. There's a reason they're flocking. It's desirable to them. It appeals to them. So what are we supposed to do with that? Because how do we match that? How do we meet that? We can't match that offer. We can't. What could we possibly offer disenfranchised men who only have, whose only value in this society is, at least they're better than women. At least they're not women. If nothing else, at least they're not fucking women. There's an order, there's a ranking system, and they're at the top, they're closer to God. Right? What could we possibly offer them? Because Maina Njenga is back in government. We have a president who is obsessed with showing us and telling us how close he is to God. And how, God put him in that position. Everything, every Sunday he's in church. Along with his, government people, administration. Every Sunday they're in church. Showing us how pious they are. how God is with them, whatever. And then now we have him merging forces with this guy who was sort of taking people back to the traditional way of being and showing them God, answering all of these questions that the church could not answer. So now, if your questions cannot be answered by, present day modern church, you're covered. That's it. And now it's like, Avengers assemble. I don't know. That part is really chilling to me because the things that were leading them here are present today, right? Economic hardships, like young men feeling disenfranchised. It's happening now. All it needs is somebody to organize it like this. We go for baptisms and then we're dead. Okay, not that.
Maina Njenga's Mungiki began to gain popularity through its religious teachings first, spreading even beyond the borders of ethnicity. This Mungiki baptism was, for instance, carried out in Baringo, home to the Tugen community and the Pokot.
Look at that. Like, it actually transcends tribe. Right? It actually transcends tribe. Most of it, as far as I can tell, is still targeted at men. I don't see any women present. I've seen children, but it seems like it's mostly targeted at men. Holy cow.
1992 was, however, to be a year when the Mungiki would undergo its first transformation. Donning the armor of a tribal defense group, the Mungiki, largely in the Rift Valley province, rallied to protect their fellow landless Kikuyu community during the 1992 tribal clashes.
The trigger was, of course, the 1992 clashes, where this group was kicked out of the Rift Valley and they constituted themselves as a Kikuyu Land Defense Force originally, before they did the mutation into Mungiki.
He was saying some people have got a very, very, very big chambers. And if they love their people, or if Kenya is one, how comes some people are having so big chambers and others are staying as squatters in their country? And if they love each another, let them share those chambers.
I mean, who could argue with that? Why should one person have all these, this whole large tracts of land and then other people are landless? What kind of society would have that? That should not happen in any kind of sensible society. And you see, the thing is, these people, by which I mean the Mungiki leadership, they're actually touching on real issues that people have. So, people, harsh economic conditions, right? And then now we have the land question. This person is asking a valid question. Why should one person have large tracts of land and other people in the same nation are completely landless? Why? That's the question that we haven't even answered till to date, at least in this country. We haven't answered it, certainly not legally, right? What's interesting to me about the land question is how we don't go far enough with that, with the question, right? Because the land was here, right? The land, we found it here. How do you own it? Like, how do you own it? How does it belong to you? We found it here. I mean, it's the same thing with the aquifers in California, right? Is it the aquifers in California? Anyway, the water in California. Is it 70 to 80% of it is owned by a couple, as in like a man and his wife, like two people, a woman and a man, two people own 70 to 80% of the water in California. How do they own it? How can you own water? You found it here. Like, you didn't make it. You found it here. It's the same thing with land. You don't make it. Like, you found it here. There's nothing you're contributing towards its production, towards its current state. You found it here. How do you own it? How then do you come to own it? Because it never used to be like that, right? Nobody owned land. You couldn't own it because somebody would have to give it to you. It would have to be given. The person who owns it would have to give it to you. When would God give it to you? How would he give it to you? How would he give it to you? To now own, not just to like live on, right? But to own like it's mine. It's really bullshit. That person is right. And the problem with these types of people, cult leaders, is they tap onto truths. They tap onto truths. And then they just go completely left field with it. And you're just like, okay. Because you start at a common truth. And this is a common truth. Why should somebody own all of that land, tracts and tracts of land, and other people in the same nation do not have any land? What could you possibly have done to deserve to own all of that land? And who gave it to you? Who gave it to you? Who gave you permission to own it? Who gave it to you? Because it doesn't, people will say the government, it doesn't belong to the government. The government is just an overseer, right? It does not belong to them. It doesn't belong to anybody. Anyway.
The days onward from December 12, 1992, when the red, black, green and white flag of the Mungiki was hoisted in Maina Njenga's parents' yard, would be days in which the Mungiki took up its first political struggle, the struggle for land. John-Allan Namu, KTN. The tribal clashes of 1992 shocked a nation that had hitherto not seen bloodshed to this scale since the Wagala massacre. Hospitals from Nakuru to Njoro were filled with clash victims from predominantly two tribes, the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin. Many of the Kalenjin community at that time complained of a militia that they had never seen before. Indeed, many thought that those either defending the Kikuyu community or going on the offensive were imported from Central Province, but that was not the case. Predominantly young, poor and landless Kikuyu men rallied around a relatively new, hitherto spiritual group called Mungiki.
There was that feeling of the Kikuyus. There was a feeling that they had been abandoned by the government. And this is where the young men come in as part of the group that helps defend the land, the Kikuyus who are attacking the Rift Valley at that period. And this is the period, according to the various researchers, this is the period that this group starts working closely with politicians.
Soon, however, the clashes ended and a land question, one asked by the two communities that were at war with each other, would be put aside by the political elite for a few more years. The Mungiki, however, would not leave this question to lie, especially given their strong ties to another group that bore uncanny similar characteristics to them, the Mau Mau.
The sons of Mau Mau, they don't have something. Why? Because when the Kenya was getting freedom, the Mau Mau and their sons were still in the forest. But the home guard, they came to receive what the Mau Mau were fighting for.
Same sense of dispossession in their own countries, same feeling of dispossession, same sense of, we are the rightful owners of this country, but we don't have a stake. They are very much influenced by the ideas and the ideals of the Mau Mau. They feel that the Mau Mau agenda and vision was never achieved.
Kikuyu politicians, however, saw the Mungiki more as a tool for political convenience and used them as such, and thus began an association with politicians that would also see the rise of the politician within the Mungiki sect. Maina Njenga's cousin, Ndura Waruinge.
Before we move on, something sort of stands out to me a little bit. I hope this really doesn't come out wrong. I really hope it doesn't, because I've just thought of it right now. So it's still something that I need to marinate on a little bit, and I will. But it's interesting to me how John-Allan Namu draws the parallels with the Mungiki. With the Mau Mau. And also the guy who was interviewed, I really like what he said. So, when the Mungiki was still in the forest fighting back the colonial forces, the home guards, who are the people who collaborated with the colonizers, were out here. They took the land, and the sons of the Mungiki are dispossessed. They do not have the land. They do not have any land, while the people who collaborated have the land. And so they feel like they were cheated out of something that is owed to them. And I really... I don't know what to say, but it's very strange to me to think of anything in terms of it's owed to you, right? Because it means you deserve it in ways that other people don't, right? So there are people in central Kenya whose relatives were neither Mungiki nor home guards, right? Were neither Mau Mau nor home guards. They were just the people who were there, right? They were just people who were there, being oppressed by the British and all of that. You cannot think of something like land in terms of it being owed to you. I feel like, and I'm gonna think about this some more, but I really don't think that's a way to think of anything, because what it means is it's almost related to, and it's our turn to eat sort of mentality. It's not a concern for everybody that says, in the same way I deserve land to live on, all other people deserve land to live on. And the issue here is that one person is holding all of this land, not that, us, a select few, our parents fought in the Mau Mau, and so like we're owed this land. Am I making sense? I have a very difficult relationship with the concept of being owed something, the concept of deserving something, because that's what they're saying here. They're saying, in a lot of ways, that they deserve it because their parents or their ancestors fought in the Mau Mau and that they were cheated out of it. I want to read you something Asla Le Guin said about deserving. And it's something that I constantly come back to because it's really the closest to how I perceive the issue of deserving. I don't think moving through life thinking you deserve something is healthy. There's no deserving. We all deserve it. And so what next? We all deserve it. We all deserve it. Everyone deserves to have a place to live, right? Everyone deserves a part of this place we call Earth. This land we call Kenya. Everyone deserves like a small part of it to live. Because you need to live, right? And you have to live somewhere. The problem is the hoarding. It's not the fact that your ancestors fought for it and so you kind of deserve it. I hope I'm making sense. But anyway, I'm going to read you what Asla Le Guin said about deserving, and it comes from the Dispossessed and Ambiguous Utopia, which is interesting because these people are also dispossessed. And then we'll move right on, and then one day, if I have hopefully aligned my thoughts, right, we'll come back to that. So I'll read it. For we, each of us, deserve everything. every luxury that was ever piled in the tombs of the dead kings, and we, each of us, deserve nothing, not a mouthful of bread in hunger. Have we not eaten while another starved? Will you punish us for that? Will you reward us for the virtue of starving while others eat? No. No man earns punishment, no man earns reward. Free your mind of the idea of deserving, the idea of earning, and you will begin to be able to think. Asla K. Gwyn, The Dispossessed, an Ambiguous Utopian. Before I move on, I'd like to say, also this idea of deserving it because your ancestors fought for it. It's interesting. Like, I have an issue with it because, like, you have no control over what your ancestors did. So what if maybe your ancestor was like just this cowardly person and like they made you and then they killed themselves. So now what? Like, you pay for the sins of your ancestor? Is that it? I do not like the idea of deserving. I do not like the idea of being owed something, especially in this kind of sense where you had nothing, you had no influence, you had nothing to do with it anyway. And so, yeah.
Dora became the face of an ever-politicizing Mungiki, often overshadowing Maina in terms of visibility. He's said to have dealt a lot more with politicians during the 1990s than Maina did as the coordinator of the Mungiki sect. And as the face of politics grew more prominent in the Mungiki,
at around 2 is when we saw the police, a contingent of police coming.
So did the violent response to a group that security forces seemingly could not understand. The early 90s, a violent time for the sect, was interestingly enough the period in which it had the ear of politicians at the top of the food chain. Kenya was first introduced to the Mungiki largely through these pictures, mass baptisms of young, dreadlocked individuals.
You know what I don't get? Why he says dreadlocked individuals when it's mostly men. Like, what is it? What is this hesitance to just say men? Because it's mostly men. I can almost count the number of women that I've seen so far. But what is this hesitance to say men? Why say individuals? Honestly, so far, from his own footage, we haven't seen a single woman getting baptized or, going through the rites. Not even one. So why does he insist on saying individuals? Why are we hesitant to say men? Because it's men. It's men. Right? It's men. It's men. It's men. It's men. And until we allow ourselves to see the problem as it really is, the first step to solving a problem is being able to identify it. If we can't identify the problem, there is no hope. There is no hope of solving it. Now, I shouldn't have to say it, but I don't know. I guess I'm gonna have to say it because the internet. I'm not saying all men, but I'm saying there's something about our society and the way that it's structured, the way patriarchy operates here, that has led to a situation where this is nearly all men. This is nearly all men. Even when it comes to the violence, the attacking of each other, it's almost exclusively men. And we have to say that. I don't understand what the hesitancy is. If there was a cult of women and they were doing some crazy shit, nobody in the fucking news would have a problem saying, oh yeah, there's this cult that's predominantly women and this is what they're doing. Nobody would have a problem with that. Why is it that when it comes to identifying the primary participants in this thing, we can't just say men? I don't understand it. I do not understand it.
Who preached peace and a return to the Kikuyu culture. But almost immediately after the public began to grapple with this face of the Mungiki, one emerged that would cement a perception of the group that would endure to this day. Kosovo village in Mathare Valley in recent times has become synonymous with the activities of the Mungiki sect. In fact, it was just over a year ago when the police held one of the most mercurial operations against the sect after 3 of their officers were killed while patrolling this valley. But what brought the Mungiki to settle here in the first place? Adherents to the group like John Jogona claim that while the Mungiki sect spread like wildfire in informal settlements like Mathare and Matatu Terminus, it had nothing to do with the extortion and racketeering that saw members of the sect, albeit illegally, earn their daily bread.
A lot of this is, most of it is below the radar of the official government, really, what is happening in the urban informal settlements.
Mungiki does not condone the use of violence. I would say that these violence acts which continues to be blamed on the Mungiki movement, I would call that part of a wider scheme to tarnish the image of the movement.
As it became apparent that there was an element amongst the Mungiki that was willing to lend itself to political use, politicians, especially from Central Province, happily indulged using the Mungiki to do their bidding.
For politicians, they see Mungiki as an asset. It's a group that can mobilize the young people for them. So it is a game of use and dump when it's convenient. And this sometimes is what you see exploding in confrontations between the Mungiki leadership or the Mungiki members and politicians.
The Mungiki sect, a more media-savvy outfit, has made a documentary of their representation of how they were used, naming in this documentary 15 prominent politicians from the Kikuyu community as well as scholars who, according to them, took an oath inducting them into the dark society only to abandon them later. Allegations of there being a list emerged last year at the height of violence perpetrated by the Mungiki, but those names were never made public. But they would set the tone for a quiet but bloody war in Central Province, with Kiambu and Muranga, where these politicians are drawn from, being the eye of the storm. By the late 1990s, all 3 faces of the Mungiki had emerged: the cultural, the criminal, and the political. These 3 faces would henceforth set the tone for a violent future, culminating in the deaths of 454 suspected Mungiki adherents in November last year. John-Allan Namu, KTN.
Do you know what's interesting to me about the final part of this clip? So the Mungiki made their own documentary talking about the politicians who used and dumped them. During the finance bill protests last year, and just throughout during the movement building online, like all of that sensitization, all of that, it's become clear that and very unfortunate that men are willing to be used, right? That men are willing to be used, and there's no ignoring it. There's no ignoring it. Even when you look at the goons that are hired by politicians to attack protesters, they're men. We are yet to see female goons being organized to attack women. We're yet to see that. And so I feel like there's just so much. Patriarchy is such a big problem because men and the socialization to violence and aggression. Like, what are we supposed to do with that? The ease with which they're willing to be used, right? So these people are saying, the guys in the documentary are saying politicians looked at this and they were like, yeah, this is something, these are people we can use, this is someone we can work with. And they worked with it. They used them. They allowed themselves to be used. Now they're saying, oh yeah, it was a pump and dump. Like they used us and then they left us alone, da-da-da. But you let them use you for violent ends. And men continue to do this, to be used for violent ends. patriarchy and men in particular are like the biggest hindrances we have to progress. I think so. It's like the biggest hindrances. All of this male aggression and violence, it's just ready to be used by politicians at any, and they're being used even now. Even now. Even now.
Towards the end of the 1990s, the nature of relationships between the Mungiki and society in general was set by this precedent. The Mungiki would be employed to do the bidding of politicians with whom its leadership felt comfortable with, as they lacked a political vehicle of their own. And the police and government in turn refused to acknowledge their complicity in the rise of another violent Mungiki.
You know what's interesting to me? Oh my God. So, the politicians at the top of the Mungiki leadership would sort of work with the politicians who were willing to work with them, right? Who were interested in working with them, and sort of send the I was going to say boys, send the men to do the bidding of these politicians. And we are constantly told how men are leaders. Men are leaders? Men are leaders how? Maina Njenga sits in his house, talks to whoever other politician, and then that guy says, oh yeah, I need some boys for something. And then Maina calls the boys and is like, yeah, guys, this person, he needs you guys, actually he doesn't even explain, he says, you guys need to go to these politicians, whatever, and then you go and do his bidding. Because Maina said. And men are leaders. Men are leaders. Okay, like if you insist on telling us this bullshit, like, listen, yap away. Men are leaders? I mean, I cannot think of anybody who could call and send me somewhere to do some political thing, and then I go, without, like, it being something that's aligned to what I want. Like, what? Oh, the head of, like, my book club said, yeah, next week we're doing this. I'm like, who are you telling? Like, who here are you instructing? Who? Like, nigga, here we discuss things. This is a democratic institution. We all weigh in and it's like, oh yeah, like, I would prefer to do this. Yeah, that does not align with my values, so I won't be doing that. Do you think any of them said that? Men are leaders. Men are leaders. And the Mungiki leadership is working with politicians and then sending those men to go and do the bidding of those politicians. Miss me with that bullshit.
And the police and government in turn refused to acknowledge their complicity in the rise of another violent Mungiki, far removed from that one began a decade ago by Maina Njenga.
The response of the state has been a law and order response. Even when the group has tried to come out of the shadows through the registration of their political party, what has happened is that the government has actually closed off that option, and by doing that, they end up driving it further underground.
2002 saw them fraternize with two political camps. Maina Njenga led a strong campaign for the election of the then local government minister Uhuru Kenyatta. But the story goes that Uhuru did not want to be associated with a group that both tarnished his campaign and was largely embroiled in intermittent battles against the Kikuyu themselves. Within no time, both Maina Njenga and Dura Waruenge were looking for leadership positions in Kenneth Matiba's Sabasaba Asili. And while those deeply involved in the Mungiki as a cultural outfit deny it, Maina Njenga's political influence on his followers was immense.
Us as a Mungiki members, we are not being used by politicians, except our leader to tell us, go and vote for some this or those or yeah.
Hey! Did you hear that? He's saying, They're not used by politicians except for their leader, Maina Njenga, telling them, go and vote for this person, and then they go and vote for her. These are the leaders. Nigga, what? Yeah. Men are the leaders, huh? Okay. Listen, hiya. Men are the leaders. Okay.
The Mungiki's search for political anchorage would be impeded by the tag they were given, in some cases rightly so, as a violent criminal gang. They were the pariahs of politics once again, and due to the multiple personality complex being largely dominated by the criminal persona of the sect was the target of violent reprisals by the police. But the Mungiki would not be denied. The cause of the original Mungiki, researchers on the sect say, became bigger than the group itself.
Now, walking through the yard where Maina Njenga grew up, one gets a sense of the background with which the Mungiki sect was formed. This, after all, was a settlement scheme populated mostly by people who are poor and impoverished. And it is against this background that he and 63 other people sat and began praying, forming the Mungiki sect. Years later, in 1992, they hoisted their flag and thus began a political movement that is controversial to date.
We have the economic aspect, and that has to be addressed economically on the economic platform. We have political problems, and these problems must be solved politically from the political platform.
Mungiki is simply trying to pose a very serious ideological question here. Here we are a group of youth, the majority in this country, enumerating all kinds of problems that the youth in this country face. And they are telling the government, look, this is the problem that we have been experiencing. You act or we act.
That's really so true. You act or we act. Ugh. It's very sad and very scary. Because it's, in a lot of ways, we're really back there again. Youth unemployment is at a record high. The cost of living is at a record high. Like, things are bad. Things are really bad. Like, if you're paying attention and even allowing yourself to just sense the atmosphere, things are really bad. Things are really bad. We're going back to that, you either act or we act. And the scary part is, I think to me, part of the really scary part to me is, I do not think the government much cares if that violence is visited on the people. They would care if that violence was directed at them, for sure. But if it was directed at the citizens, keep them scared, keep them quiet, I don't think they care. I do not think they'd care about that. And that's part of why the Mungiki, Maina Njenga, getting together with government is really scary. Because then it means that once he has his men together again, they won't be weaponized against the government. They'll be weaponized against government critics and the people. They'll just let them loose to, have the purge. So let loose all of that, pent-up anger or whatever. All that aggression they have. All the feelings they've been bottling up about how dispossessed they are, how poor they are, how ignored they are, how their needs are not being met, how terrible the society is. And then all of that will just be released on us, ordinary people. It's very scary because they already have structures in place. They have a game plan that once worked, right? Like the Matatu Terminus thing, they have a game plan that once worked. They just need to tweak it a little bit for like the 21st century, but they'll do it.
The onslaught against the sect would not end though. If anything, its tempo would increase to a crescendo of violence perpetrated by suspected Mungiki adherents and meted out by the police against a sect that seemed to deserve nothing less than a bullet. In Central Province though, the struggle took on an intra-ethnic, intra-generational perspective. The criminal element of the Mungiki began a series of killings in Kiambu, Murang'a and urban settlements in Nairobi. Then a significant event pushed the violence over the edge. Maina Njenga, arrested in 2005 and charged with possession of drugs and an illegal firearm, was convicted of the same 2 years later and jailed. Fear was abound within the sect that Maina was in danger. Their reaction thereafter underscored how much they still revered him. The folk story around his formation of the Mungiki is still strong.
Maina Njenga died, and then after 3 days he resurrected.
He's a mortal man, a man who sleeps, wakes up, and a man who sees no visions or anything. But for a group of people who are desperate, they'll conjure all manner of a mystique around their leader.
Nothing should happen to him. Whoever could be responsible for that whatsoever should take care, because nothing should happen to him.
Look at that. This is, once again, coming from the leaders. They actually believe, a subsect of his group actually believe that he died and rose again. These are not ordinary followers. These are like fanatics, sycophants, dangerous people. Like that man, he just sounded so reasonable, right? A minute ago, he sounded like a reasonable person when he was talking about the land question, right? And poverty and whatever, right? So reasonable. And then now he's telling us Maina Njenga rose from the dead, making him a Christ-like figure, making him godlike. These are dangerous people. Holy cow. Holy cow. My God. Okay.
The night of his conviction, the criminal element, thought to have long stopped believing in Njenga, went on a rampage in Nairobi and Central Province. Then the government responded accordingly.
It is now time for those who instill fear and terror in Kenyans to have a dose of their own medicine.
Kenya then turned onto a page of the story of this gang written in the blood of the Mungiki, the police, and the innocent caught in the crossfire. But in Central Province, the struggle between the Mungiki and the establishment would be at its most violent. Reports of beheadings perpetrated by the Mungiki in Central Province left the nation aghast, and the police with the moral authority to carry out a huge reprisal against the sect. Kosovo village in Mathare would not forget the day when the police literally tore apart the informal settlement looking for the Mungiki, and the sect members they found would leave the valley wrapped in blood-stained sheets. The months that followed would mark a sharp decline in crime associated with the Mungiki, and while Kenyans sighed with relief, the tactics adopted by the police in dealing with the sect were being questioned. A November 2007 report on the alleged arbitrary execution of 454 young men, almost all by a bullet to the head. And another key thread running through the deaths of these men, one profile fitted almost all of them. They were young, in their 20s or 30s, and they were all Kikuyu.
It's really... I am an abolitionist, right? In the sense that I have had abolitionists, I have heard about and read about like the abolition theories and like the whole ideology, the whole worldview, and it makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world, right? Police do not protect us, right? These people, for example, the ones who were beheaded, what did police do for them? Police didn't do nothing for them. Police do not protect us, right? The reason all of this crime, all of this violence exists in society is because of the systems we have in place that condone and actually like fan the flames of this kind of violence at institutional level and also at interpersonal levels, right? Like, I agree with that. Police violence does not protect us. If anything, it makes the more police we have, the more vulnerable we are to being on the receiving end of police violence. However, and this has me very conflicted, However, there was such a sense of relief, right? When he talked about how police killed the members of the sect, and weeks, months later, there was just like reduced criminal activity, terror activity from the gang. Because these people, this is a terrorist group. And a terrorist group in the sense that they're spreading terror among people. They beheaded people, as in, I can't even imagine, beheaded. Right? This is not a group to play with. And I just, like, it makes me very sad about how sort of the government is sort of complicit in allowing Mungiki to get to this place. They allow them to get to this place, even use them at their campaigns and whatever. And then now when they get out of hand and people are getting beheaded, now they kill them almost indiscriminately, and there's obviously innocent people caught in the crossfire. And it's, I don't know, it's just very sad because depending on your socioeconomic class, you can just really find yourself on the receiving end of this thing. Because it was a low-income neighborhood, it was, informal settlements, and they go there and they just rampage. That's the word they use. Police go on a killing rampage, and it's very sad. It's very sad. I still sort of ascribe to abolitionist values. I do. I agree with pretty much all that they say. The way we solve social problems is not through the police. Certainly not by killing people. Not sending police to kill people. And in a lot of ways, what we have here are economic and social problems. Young men feeling disenfranchised. They're poor. And so they need some, instead of solving that problem by meeting their physical, material needs, we allow it to escalate until they're beheading people, which is just unfortunate, very sad.
They can kill me, they can kill you, they have killed those they have killed, but they cannot kill us.
Criminal sects such as these ones are rather adept at deflecting the blames for their crimes to other quarters.
Indeed, this statement became more and more apparent every time the Mungiki re-emerged. Their calls for recognition getting angrier and more brazen, they seemingly being able to march into town and demonstrate whenever they felt like it. The post-election crisis revealed a number of truths about a majority of Kenya's youth. That this, the largest group in Kenya, has the least stake in the country's leadership and thus the least to lose. Thus began attempts to reach out to the community, first by Prime Minister Raila Odinga, then by leaders from the Kikuyu community itself. Ndorawa Roinge, long out of the sect, trading his post as coordinator for the pulpit, looks back at the Mungiki and is not sure that either group could solve the Mungiki problem.
I really think that we ignore the role of religion and the desire that people have for connection with God. We ignore it to our own peril for people who are not religious, right? Like, we ignore it to our own peril. Because I for example, have no desire. I have no desire for like a God person. Like, I have no desire. Like, I'm good, I'm cool. But people seem to have this desire. And we ignore it honestly to our own peril, because then you have the Ndura Ringis, who is just basically traded one way of manipulation for another way. And we see it everywhere. Like in the US, for example, Christian nationalism, right? Pulpits were used to like campaign for Trump. Pulpits. Currently, evangelical Christians in the US think Jesus was weak because of saying things like, turn the other cheek and like feed the hungry and like, I guess, stupid things like that. I think we need people to rise up. I don't know. I think we need people to rise up who are teaching a different gospel. A different gospel that centers a concern for other people. Jesus style. Feeding the hungry, healing the sick. Accepting the outcast. Yeah, hanging out with women, and not just women, hoes, full on hoes. That's what we need. And in this authoritarian fascist world we're headed towards, that's not gonna be in the sermons. Feeding the hungry, feeding who? Like let them work hard. Oh, hoes? Hell no. I don't know. We have to think of the religious question, the religion question, the faith issue, and how we go back to a faith that was rooted in liberation. Because faith used to be like that, right? In Latin America, they had liberation theology. In the US, during the civil rights movement, I swear to God, I was reading Snake. I could not believe the role the church was playing. The church was paying bail for people who were arrested. The church was providing a meeting place for organizers to come and meet, to come and organize from there. The church was speaking about these things from the pulpit. Reverends were getting bombed. That's what was happening. They were getting arrested. That's what was happening. The church was hosting people. That's what they were doing. When civil rights activists came in from like another state, they would be hosted by like the pastor and his wife and like congregants. That's what the church did. The church was boots on the ground, involved in activism work, involved in resistance work, involved in liberation work, and it wasn't contrary to their faith. They were doing it in line with their faith, which means there's a worldview they had that allowed them, that in fact, not just allowed them, but led them to use their faith in the struggle for liberation. So what is this? What is this we're seeing now? And why do we not have preachers who are speaking in the same way? Liberation of like the least among us, the poorest, the most disenfranchised. I don't know. I feel like we really need to do some work. We need to do a lot of work. A lot. When it comes to faith and the religious question.
From whichever side it came from, whether it is Raila or it is Njenga Karume, they all belong to the same class. They are the birds of the same feathers.
Kenya stands on the precipice. The youth continue to be excluded, and their frustration seems almost at a boiling point. Everywhere in the country, they cast shadows on the prospects of the country. And if the country's focus does not turn to the youth, then this shadow will grow. The shadow of unemployment, the shadow of violence and anger, the shadow of dissatisfaction, the shadow of the Mungiki. John-Allan Namu, KTN.
Okay, cool. I want to find, in closing, a quote by Octavia Butler, and in which so this is from the parable of the sower. And so Agra, our main character, she's freaking out. She's sort of allowing herself to see things that other people are ignoring for whatever reason. Maybe fear, denial, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna read you some things that she says that I think would be good for us as we sort of make ourselves see what things really are in this country and not turn away and not deceive ourselves, none of that. So she's talking about, she's 15 years old, so that's really crazy. And they start the conversation with, "Don't you ever wonder if maybe Amy and Mrs. Sims are the lucky ones?" I asked. And so, Amy and Mrs. Sims are their dead neighbors. Amy was a child and Mrs. Sims was an older woman who, Mrs. Sims shot herself, she committed suicide, and Amy was shot by a stray bullet or something. After that, after talking about are Amy and Mrs. Sims not the lucky ones, they talk about the other things that are happening all over. So you have rape and robbery, all kinds of murders, cholera spreading, all kinds of, wildfires and other, what do we call them? Natural disasters like tornadoes that are spreading and like just smashing the hell out of Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, and other states. And then they talk about measles. I mean, these children are talking about everything that's wrong with the world, right? And then, so her friend is Joanne. Why has her name just gone? Anyway, and her friend's name is Joanne. All right. I'm gonna read you another part after they've finished discussing all of these crazy things. All right. I know. She sounded almost bored. Things are bad. My mother is hoping this new guy, President Donner, will start to get us back to normal. Normal? I muttered. I wonder what that is. Do you agree with your mother? No, Donner hasn't got a chance. I think he would fix things if he could, but Harry says his ideas are scary. Harry says he'll set the country back 100 years. My father says something like that. I'm surprised that Harry agrees. He would. His own father thinks Donner is God. Harry wouldn't agree with him on anything. I laughed, distracted, thinking about Harry's battles with his father. Neighborhood fireworks. Plenty of flash, but no real fire. Why do you want to talk about this stuff? Joanne asked, bringing me back to the real fire. We can't do anything about it. We have to. Have to what? We're 15. What can we do? We can get ready. That's what we've got to do now. Get ready for what's going to happen. Get ready to survive it. Get ready to make a life afterward. Get focused on arranging to survive so that we can do more than just get battered around by crazy people, desperate people, thugs and leaders who don't know what they're doing. She just stared at me. I don't know what you're talking about. I was rolling too fast, maybe. I'm talking about this place, Joe, this cul-de-sac with a wall around it. I'm talking about the day a big bang of those hungry, desperate, crazy people outside decide to come in. I'm talking about what we've got to do before that happens so that we can survive and rebuild, or at least survive and escape to something other than beggars. Someone's going to just smash in our wall and come in. More likely, blast it down or blast the gate open. It's going to happen someday. You know that as well as I do. Oh, no, I don't, she protested. She sat up straight, almost stiff, her lunch forgotten for the moment. I bit into a piece of acorn bread that was full of dried fruits and nuts. It's a favorite of mine, but I managed to chew and swallow without tasting it. Joe, we're in trouble. You've already admitted that. Sure, she said. More shootings, more break-ins. That's what I meant. And that's what will happen for a while. I wish I could guess how long. We'll be hit and hit and hit, then the big hit will come. And if we're not ready for it, it will be like Jericho. She held herself rigid, rejecting. You don't know that. You can't read the future. No one can. You can, I said, if you want to. It's scary, but once you get past the fear, it's easy. In LA, some world communities bigger and stronger than this one just aren't there anymore. Nothing left but ruins, rats, and squatters. What happened to them can happen to us. We'll die in here unless we get busy now and work out ways to survive. If you think that, why don't you tell your parents, warn them and see what they say? I intend to, as soon as I can think of a way that will reach them. Besides, I think they already know. I think my father does anyway. I think most of the adults know. They don't want to know, but they do. And that is the truth. That is a big truth, right? Oh, end quote, sorry, end quote. Sometimes we don't want to know something, but we know. We don't want to know it, but we know. Like in the case of Kenya, we don't want to know it, but we know. We know it's only going to get worse, and it's not just Kenya, it's the world. We don't want to know it. We even, we're denying it. We're trying to look everywhere but at what is happening, but we know. We know. We know. So, the friend is like, the friend says, it doesn't make a difference, she said. We can't make the climate change back, no matter why it changed in the first place. You and I can't, the neighborhood can't, we can't do anything. I lost patience. Then let's kill ourselves now and be done with it. End quote. And, Yeah. If we're going to act like there's nothing we can do, then let's just kill ourselves and be done with it. Otherwise, our work is cut out for us. As Angela Davis said, we don't get to choose the circumstances of our resistance. Quite unfortunately, we don't. These are the cards we've been dealt, and they're terrible. They are the worst cards I have ever seen in my entire life. Fuck these cards, right? Or like in my entire life in Kenya, all right? Sorry. They're the worst cards, but they're the cards we have, and we have to play them. We can play them, or we can take ourselves out the game, because that's it. Those are the options. We have to play the cards we've been dealt, fight back, prepare to survive, do everything we can to like get ready for what's coming, because it's coming. Whether we want to believe it or not, we know it's coming. Anyway, so our girl shares books on survival, the wilderness, guns, shooting, like plants, livestock raising, all kinds of things that you need to be able to live off the land. She shares them with this girl, and this girl, she still thinks it's a bit of an exaggeration, but our girl says, every time I go outside, I try to imagine what it might be like to live out there without walls, and I realize I don't know anything. And that is us right now, I think. In a lot of ways, part of, I think, the paralysis that we're experiencing with people is just you realize that you don't know anything about this moment, about this particular moment. Like, we know the theory of it, like, oh, we need to organize, but like, there's so much we don't know. And the solution obviously is to read. Our girl gives the friend books and is like, yeah, we need to read all of this. And the friend says, she gave me, and so this interaction happens. She gave me a nervous smile. You've been reading too many adventure stories, she said. I frowned. How could I reach her? This isn't a joke, Joe. What is it then? She ate the last section of her orange. What do you want me to say? I want you to be serious. I realize I don't know very much. None of us knows very much, but we can all learn more. Then we can teach one another. We can stop denying reality or hoping it will go away. The friend says books aren't going to save us. And our girl says nothing is going to save us. If we don't save ourselves, we're dead. And holy cow. That is so true. If we do not save ourselves, we're dead. And all we have is us. And these are the cards we've been dealt. And there's no more looking away and denying what's happening and hoping things will change. And Christians here, I'm talking to you. Part of praying is like, I think, is just the hoping. At some point, we have to actually start doing the work. Right? And I'm as, I guess maybe scared as anybody else who is scared. If you're not scared, thank you. And if you could please share with the group how come you're not scared, that would be great. But yeah, it's time to face what's happening. We're in serious trouble in this country. We're in very serious trouble. It's not going to get better. We know this. Even if we don't want to know it, we know it. It's not going to get better unless we do things. And we have to learn. And then we have to teach each other. And then we have to do things. We have to do whatever it takes to survive. And not just for us as individuals, but for our community, our nation, our people. We have to do whatever it takes. Because we're in serious trouble. There's no more denial. There's no more room for it. We're in serious trouble. Like, the crisis we were afraid of. We're in a crisis. Like, it's time to act like we're in serious crisis mode, because we are. We're in a serious crisis mode. And, holy cow. Yeah. our options are either to start working towards saving ourselves, towards surviving, or we just take ourselves out the game. That's it. Those are the two options. Because the cards have been dealt. We do not get to choose the conditions under which we struggle, under which we resist. These are the conditions that we find ourselves in, and we just have to fight back under these conditions. So, yeah. Maina Njenga being back in parliament, not in parliament, back in bed with government, that's telling us something, and we have to look at it and see it and not look away and lie to ourselves. It's happening. This is happening. There's real trouble ahead, and it's time to prepare. So we read. We learn things. I think. Oh yeah. Having said that I'm scared, I should say that the one thing that is sort of helping to manage my fear and anxiety is just everything that we've learned from historians, including people like Howard Zinn. And who was it that said once the divine right of kings looked like even that was not, it couldn't be fought? I think it was Aslan. Just looking at history, people have won. People have fought back and they have won under worse circumstances, and that's encouraging to me. All you need to do is read other people's stories, and you'll see that, it's not a unique fight. The other people have fought it and they've won, and that we can learn from them and build up on their struggle, and then the people who are coming after can also build up on that. And because struggle is like, I don't think it stops. It's just sometimes we have better conditions for it, and sometimes we're in Kenya or in fascist US. So we're in trouble. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, but also let's read about how other people have fought back and have won, and allow that to encourage us. The divine right of kings looked like it can be fought, like it was the most obvious thing, and now we're just like, the divine right of who? Fuck the monarchy. So yeah, cool. I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for stopping by. Yeah. Until next time, remember who you are. Love life, love people, and stay lunatic. Bye.